What we did is when we bid it, we considered where Fairmount ends sort of at, or takes the jog by Brainerd. That area is pretty worn, just the way the car is kind of loaded. So we got a price for what it would take to resurface that portion of it as well. My recommendation is to do it all at the same time.
If you add the pricing plus the alternate bid items for Roniak versus Tioga Highway, it comes in, if we do the alternates, it actually comes in a little bit less to do Tioga Highway rather than Roniak. If you add the number, so it's 1.174325 for the actual number for Roniak, and then Yaga is 1229045. But then alternate bid items is no, never mind. I'm off by one figure.
Yeah, it's a little more.
Okay.
Okay, never mind. Does it matter with the? I know, right. Does it matter if the number of days to complete, like Roniak is 90 days versus 65, and whether or not they start earliest at August versus July? Is it worth paying a little bit more to start earlier and complete earlier?
Yeah, if we were up against a really tough deadline, I would consider that. I think in this particular case, we have enough cushion. I don't really see a problem with them fulfilling the contract in time before winter weather is upon us.
Okay, any other questions?
Just one comment. This is just another time when we got these bids at the end of the business day yesterday. It'd be nice if the public, and council could see these further ahead. It would just be more transparent. I know we want to get this done and it's important and it's pretty mundane, but it's just, not just from you, Don, just in general.
Just one question. They had their earliest start date. Did they ever beat that?
At times they do. Sometimes there's a break in their schedule and they can move things up. They're trying to gauge weather and all those things.
Yeah. If they're, trying to under promise and over deliver, maybe that's not the next action.
Yeah, we, especially that sort of second half of the paving season, we really try to hold them tight to their start dates to make sure.
Will it be similar to the closure that we have on Gates Mills Boulevard, where like one lane is closed up for a little bit of time, the other one is under two?
Yeah, it's a moving operation. It will be open to traffic. It will just be a little bit of interruption while we're physically doing the paving or milling work. We'll maintain traffic.
I think Gates Mills is going great, by the way.
It's coming out really nice.
When will Gates Mills be wrapping up done?
It's a little deceiving because they're putting what's called the intermediate course of asphalt. It's not the finished layer. They put that down and then they kind of take care of all the concrete work, the curb work, some catch basins. So that'll be going on over the coming weeks, probably 3 or 4 weeks, and then they'll come in and put the final layer of asphalt.
Okay.
For about a month now.
And that's why I asked, so that everyone just has a sense that this is not finishing by the end of this week. Thank you. All right, if that's the conclusion of the conversation, does anyone want to make a motion to adopt this?
So moved. Second.
Any further discussion? Hearing none, roll call, please.
Mr. Knoll?
Yes.
Ms. Atron?
Yes.
Ms. Welton?
Yes.
Ms. Godet? Yes. Mr. Lemay?
Yes.
Mr. Gentle?
Yes.
Dr. Wong? Yes.
All right. Now we will move on to a return to our docket, which is the motion to ratify labor and expenses for emergency repairs performed by Neroni and Sons to Fairmount Boulevard as a result of a water leak. This is in the amount of $39,480. A water leak is understating what occurred there. Don, you want to remind council?
Sure. It was a cold December day.
Was it dark and stormy too?
Dark and stormy. Right near the end of the year, we had a water line break right kind of in front of Ursuline College. It was bad enough where it really undermined a lot of the roadway. We didn't know the full extent of it immediately because there was a lot of mud on top of the roadway. Still in this shape. We engaged Neroni and Sons contractor, they've done emergency work for us in the past to come out, take a look at it and give us an approximate number. They did that actually on December 30th or 31st, and they gave me a number on January 2nd. And it was higher than what we spent, but we tracked what they did. And as they cleaned off the road and developed the limits of work, we were out there to make sure that, it was the right amount of work that was being done. We had the materials, and we had the labor, and equipment, all documented. The number was 38, and no change. I didn't see it. And they were able to get it done. It actually got really cold right after that, right after the beginning of the year with 10 months. Instead, they had to wait a couple weeks to place concrete. So they did it as quickly as they could.
Peter, I call on you for your first task. Here's in public at least. Can you reflect to council the available appropriations for having spent this money?
There was over $10 million appropriated in the capital improvements budget. So if this was not anticipated, I do not anticipate this being an issue where we'd have to reappropriate at any point. If we did spend more than what we anticipated throughout the year, then at the end of the year, we definitely need to appropriate, or at whatever point that we would normally appropriate, additional funds for the project. But right now, don't anticipate there being any overages. I did talk to the engineer a couple times this week. He indicated to me there were a couple of projects that were a couple $100,000 running under. So if everything else stays true to budget, we should not have any issues
Peter, where do you get that number?
from the budget.
Well, which line item? Just, this was coded to 06B 485, street maintenance and repair under the capital. That's where it was coded, and that's 8,720,000 is total.
I was looking at the budget by fund, and the capital fund had over $10 million appropriated in it. And if we go over that $10 million, yeah, we definitely need to reappropriate.
So the appropriation line items that are in the budget aren't binding in terms of their specificity?
Usually we look at the fund in total, and if we go over the fund in total, we need to appropriate for that.
Is that how you think about it, Ken?
Well, I look at it that we appropriated for those specific projects that came out to 8,720,000, was it?
Yeah.
Yeah, there were specific projects where we appropriated for those, that many dollars. And there was a certain amount for that line item. And this item wasn't called out. It wasn't, there was no contingency, there was no emergency fund in those numbers. So I look at it in a more specific way. You said usually, so I'm not sure exactly what that means. But you appropriate in a budget for the line items that you call out.
Well, the appropriation ordinance from December, as I recall, I don't have it in front of me. As I recall, there's an exhibit A to the appropriation ordinance, and it describes capital funds project. And it's very broad. It's not referenced back to any line item in the budget itself. The total that may be reflected in the appropriation ordinance, I understand, is driven by reflection back as to some of the many specific items in the budget document.
So is that
But
number
the
then,
budget document is not part of that ordinance.
so is that fungible money then? Is that how this is thought about? And the appropriation ordinance, you can spend that on anything that's capital?
Well, no, anything that requires a contract over $25,000, the council is going to have to review and vote upon to authorize the expenditure of that money for a contract. So no, it's not just you can spend the money anywhere.
Well, no, but I mean, from a budget standpoint, when we authorize $2 million for Gates Mills repaving or something like that, the way you're looking at this, and I'm just getting an education on how to think about this, is you don't need to spend it on that. It can be spent on any capital project, even though it's called out in the budget as a line item for one street.
No,
That's what I'm struggling with a little bit.
Okay, I think you're you're conflating two different ideas, I think. The budget, I think, does describe a variety of projects that have estimates, because they're estimates. Because it's
Sure.
back in December that we voted on this.
Yeah.
Or you voted on it. And that Don puts together, working with the finance department, their best estimate of what a project and some of projects are going to be appropriate to be budgeted.
Mm.
And then an appropriation ordinance is then adopted.
Okay.
Yes, is driven off the total numbers.
Yeah,
But yes, the particular projects, however, themselves, none of those projects are appropriated for. And as Mr. Gentili has pointed out in a number of council meetings, I think, appropriations are different than budgets.
sure.
And that that's why any matter that comes before council that the administration wishes to spend, some significant amount of money on,
Right.
requires approval by the council, which again, that contract is going to reference back, and often in the conversation,
Right.
Don, for instance, will say, oh gee, now we've got bids that are, X hundreds of thousands of dollars less than we had budgeted for. But that's to the benefit of the city.
It seems that we've always, if one of those projects comes in over the amount that's in the budget, it seems that we've always appropriated more money at that time for that project. We have reflected back to the budget. I mean, I know that's.
I don't think the appropriation is being made then, Mr. Gentili. I think what's occurring is that contract is being approved. And then towards the end of the year, traditionally what has happened is that an additional appropriation ordinance is presented that brings up to balance whatever those funds. If you get to a point in the year when we have a project awaiting that doesn't have enough funds to authorize the contract, then we're going to need an interim appropriation if we want to pursue that contract. But generally, at the end of the year, as you know, there's an adjusted appropriation ordinance that we generally adopt. And that brings true all these different funds. But in the meanwhile, the funds that have been appropriated for an area, for a particular fund, those funds are available. And for an emergency like this, we can draw upon those funds to take care of that emergency.
This is different because I had that discussion with Joe many times, that the budget is not the appropriations, and he always said that it was. So
I'm not here to.
we're laboring under two different sets of rules.
Well, it's a conversation I think we'll have to continue to have.
The fall appropriation ordinance, did you happen to have the date of that? I'm just gonna go back.
It was December, what was our meeting, 30th? December 30th?
Oh, and at
24th?
the budget meeting that we
The budget,
December.
we adopted the
Oh, the budget.
2024 budget, or appropriation ordinance.
The appropriation ordinance was that special meeting we had at the AG.
Right, I think it was December 30th last year.
Very briefly, just to do that.
Well, the brief meeting though flows from the much longer.
Yeah, the budget ordinance should have been the last ordinance.
So we're saying any underspent money that was appropriated can be spent for anything capital, which is pretty much everything a large portion of what we do. It can just be used however.
Well, it requires council's approval for any contract.
Yeah, I thought the control is a lower level. I mean, if this is if Joe had led that the budget is the appropriation. I agree. Joe kept saying that. That's why I pursued this line of inquiry.
If I'm misstating it, Peter, please correct me.
What's your
I'm a lawyer,
experience with this, Peter?
I'm not a finance lawyer.
Again, I'm certainly used to looking at all the different projects within the fund, and if there's money left over in any project, it could be used for something else.
It's fungible within the fund, is what you said.
Exactly. Yes, sir.
That's a different view than we've been laboring under the last few years.
Especially when we add in money because
I mean,
of a specific project.
That was my understanding. I don't, you're saying that it's different, but that was my understanding. For me, I'm not citing something new. Understand?
In the year in,
That was the discussion I had over and over with Joe about whether the budget and appropriation are the same
I
thing.
wasn't part of this, so I
And-
don't know.
he always said that the budget was the appropriation.
Well, they happened during some finance.
So when we true this up at year end, it's just truing up fund balances. That's that. When we,
No, it's more than that.
it's more than, yeah,
There's more line items than that.
yeah.
It's not just appropriations for by fund, it's by a number of line items. I don't have.
Because sometimes we do it in the middle of the year too, or there's something has happened where we have one or two of those quote true ups
Right.
during the year.
We had a very expensive vehicle that we bought, for example.
Right.
Which was like $100,000 more. I can't remember the vehicle. Jim, but I remember that very
So we bought the
vividly.
backhaul,
The back.
and it was in the middle of the year. and
Yeah, that
we
was.
Pretty sure you did a fund.
So that
Yeah.
fund may have been exceeded at that point in time, requiring an interim additional appropriation.
Because that fund was something specific for,
It wasn't the capital improvement fund, it was whatever fund we take.
It came out of our capital budget for vehicles.
Yeah.
And we
Still
already
capital
spent,
budget, but it's a vehicle. Yeah.
you know, we had
Well,
some
I'm thinking
vehicles in our
about-
capital budget at the beginning of the year. And
See
we
that?
already spent most of that.
but see, that goes against that notion, because that would say that the budget is the appropriation.
Between the funds, I don't know that they're fungible.
That's
If
all in the
that's
same
your
fund.
question, I'm not saying they're fungible between the funds.
But the vehicle's a capital fund
It's in
item,
the same fund.
so you should never have to do a mid-year correction because the fund balance will always have enough. It's only at the year end when you may have spent too much.
Okay.
So I'm just, what my concern is the practice has been what Jim just said. To true up mid-year, looking at individual line items. Because there was not an appropriation for vehicles, which is a capital line item. So that would say that it's not fungible. We've not treated it that as fungible money. We treated it as this is the
Yeah,
appropriation.
I can't go back and understand what that finance director's anticipation may have been as to why you wanted to get it
But
correct.
for something as minor as a vehicle,
It was an expensive vehicle.
well, yeah, but the appropriation.
It wasn't a minor vehicle.
But the appropriation is over 10 million for the year. There's no way that vehicle mid-year would have caused the appropriation to be.
And the appropriation ordinance, true of is done by the department. It's not done by the fund. So,
I'm just reciting my understanding. And if the former finance director had a different understanding, then that's his, Peter, the future finance guy, would. All I know is that Peter is assuring me that we have adequate appropriation currently to approve this $39,000 expenditure.
But to the other side of the story, we've just not practiced that. Because Jim's example would say we've not practiced that. That's a line item. We need to bump the line item, which is equating the line item with the appropriation.
Okay. Well, I think I hear what you're saying. I think it's a discussion
And I
we
don't know.
need to have with the finance director.
I guess I don't.
necessarily me.
Yeah, again, I guess the question is that between these two views, what is customary practice, and as a city, can we choose, have we chosen to make the appropriation the budget? And I'd have to go back and read the ordinance to see exactly what it says, to see if, I'm assuming as a city, we could decide that the budget is the appropriation. And if the ordinance was worded that way, then that's would be the case.
Yeah, Brad.
So
I like it. So,
Well,
I don't know what exhibit, actually, I don't want to disagree. I don't know what exhibit A under the law is supposed to be for that appropriation ordinance. I don't know what the answer is.
The auditor will say, the state auditor will say that the level of control for Ohio municipal budgets is at the fund level. So if you have sufficient funds in the capital improvement fund and you want to make a payment out of that, that's going to be legal. Whether you try to restrict, I mean, there's no question you put together a plan for the year that's called the budget, but the appropriation ordinance is what is legally controlling it from the lawfulness of an expenditure.
But if we had that ordinance say, here's the appropriation and it's by line item, we could do that as a city.
Well, yes,
We could.
but
We-
as from, you are not going to be able to override the way the Ohio auditor is going to look at it in terms of how much money you have in the general fund, how much you have in the capital
Sure.
improvement fund. If you put 100,000 in there and you spend 125 out of it, you're gonna have a problem. If you have 10 million in it, and you only spend 5 million out of it, you're good.
I'm saying something different. As a matter of local law, we could decide that appropriations are by line. We're a charter city.
You could.
And we could do that. And so my question now is, I want to read this ordinance, just to make sure how we did that, to make sure that as a matter of local law, we have.
The ordinance we have online doesn't have exhibit A that has the actual detail, just.
Do you want me to?
And that's been our practice.
Well, but if it's part of the ordinance, then we're bound to that as a matter of local law. Just because we're a local charter municipality, we could do such a thing if we thought it. But I'm curious, because Joe always led that impression to us. Maybe that was wrong. But I want to look at the ordinance and the exhibit and just see how we've done it. And just decide as a city if we want to have capital that's just fungible. I'm okay with that, because as the mayor points out, there's another level of controls with the spending authority to make contracts.
Right.
So, I'd
Which
rather,
seems more flexible and thoughtful to me to do it.
I got that. It's just that we've been led down, I personally have been led, and I think the practice, as Jim's example provides, is we have done this by line item. And so we've treated these as appropriations rather than just a budget.
Well, right now, the issue before us tonight is the approval of this emergency repair bill.
But it's,
That we do have an appropriation for. And because it's within the capital fund budget, and is there another area? I don't know. It's within that,
But it's-
in
but it's-
the appropriation order.
but it's not within the line items that are specified.
budget.
If this is just a budget and not appropriation, that's my question.
That's,
And that depends on what
yes, that
that
is not the exhibit A to our December 30th
I need to see
appropriations
that.
ordinance.
I need to see that before I'm comfortable ratifying it. I just understand that.
I'd like to bring up another topic. Okay.
No, we're gonna send it up, please.
So, okay,
Okay.
I want to see that before we ratify. Just so I,
You want, she can go get it right now.
well, depending on what it says and how easy it is.
It's one
Right
page.
Okay,
It's one page.
It's what
That's
we
all.
looked at earlier, right?
Okay.
The same ordinance. Are we talking about the resolution?
That would be I checked it, yes, that's the December 30th.
and then the other points are just to be, Mr. Mayor, and maybe you're gonna raise it, it's just the 25,000.
I have
Go ahead.
I would like to kind of touch on the process. That there was an email chain that I forwarded to all of council before the last meeting. Because I inquired about this expenditure at the March 25th Finance Committee meeting, when I was preparing the check register for the month. I noticed a check in the amount of $39,480.71 for a Fairmont project. It caught my eye because I didn't recall council authorizing expenditures for any project of Fairmont. So I started asking some questions, doing my due diligence. And first at the Finance Committee and then through series of emails. So I understand the emergency nature of dealing with an event like this, but I also understand what spending limits and processes our code allows. And quite frankly, the rules were ignored on this. I have a timeline that went from the water main break, which occurred on December 30th, which Don just said that he had an estimate, he had a bid estimate, which he forwarded to me that was in the amount of $53,900 for the project. So there was a purchase order issued on January 1st in the amount of $25,000. When that bid came in, we should have been notified at some point that there was a project going on that we needed to authorize the expenditure for that, and that didn't happen. We as a council met on January 9th, January 14th, January 22nd, January 28th. An invoice then came in on January 31st in the amount of $39,480. That invoice was then split into two purchase orders. One of exactly $25,000, which is the mayor's spending authority, and then a second purchase order for $14,480.71. After that happened, we also met on February 11th, February 25th, March 11th, March 25th. That was when I asked about the email. None of this was brought to our attention, and it could have been. We didn't necessarily need to do a motion to ratify that came to council in April, that we're now looking at in May. It should have been a flag raised at many other points in this process, which is making me very uncomfortable with what has occurred.
I agree, I think it's highly problematic that this timeline, that the PO was split. It seems pretty transparent that it was split intentionally to circumvent the ordinance.
Well, let me say this, and Don, I'm gonna have to ask you to, if you know the timeline yourself. I was unaware of any expense level for this project. I want to say that. I didn't know. In January, we did bring to council, I think it was on Ms. Zatrok's question, if I recall, what was going on Fairmount Boulevard. And it was at a January meeting that we brought forward and discussed with council that there had been this water break of a major water line on Fairmount, and that Fairmount was closed down, and that the project was ongoing. I believe that was part of the discussion. And I don't know, can you fill in any more, Don?
Yes, well, when I did talk to the contractor, and he gave me the fairly large number, sort of an outside number, where he thought, I think he even put not to exceed number on this. So I view that as is sort of very conservative estimate, as he put the outside number. So I thought, when I looked at it, that it would probably be in the range of anywhere from $30,000 to $40,000. I didn't predict it 53 or whatever the number was. But again, we hadn't unearthed the extent of the damage. And sometimes, even if it doesn't look that bad on the surface, we find out that there's some caving in underneath. So when we did their work, it was, they were already out there saw cutting and engaged in doing the work. We tracked all the work that they did, and they gave us their final invoice was based on all those work that was actually done. That number could have been a little lower or a little higher. I'm not trying to tell you the contractor. I think he did a good job. He came out and worked in difficult conditions and got the work done in a timely way, and that's kind of the extent of it. So when I got the invoice from Brody, I forwarded it to the city and recommended for payment. So all I was looking at, I wasn't looking at council rules and who has authorization. I was looking at the total cost.
Yeah, and to the extent that and again, I actually agree with I think it's unfortunate I was not made aware of this. A lot of this expense coming in and being reported out came at the same time as we were losing our finance director at the time and transitioning. There's a lot of disruption going on in the finance department, as you're aware. So actually, when you pointed out at the, I think it was the finance committee meeting about that $39,000 bill, my reaction was similar to yours, and I left that meeting and said, what is this? We need to have council approve this. There's never an approval of this amount. We need to have that happen. That's when I actually focused in that bill was out there and existing as a special event bill that had not come before council. I was not happy with that. But so far as the circumstance in February, early March, whenever this thing should have been put forward, and I apologize to council for it. That was, it got caught up in some of the tumult that we were having at the time, and shouldn't have gone down that way, but I'm glad that it's before council now, and that we can.
But I'd like to circle back, because if a contract is coming in above $25,000 limit, why was it not brought to us sooner? Like, I don't see any reason that we shouldn't have heard of this ahead of time. I really, I don't accept any excuses for it. It doesn't make sense to me.
Councilwoman, I'm not trying to provide you with excuses. I'm trying to tell you what the reality was, that I was unaware of it to be putting it forward. We did not have an on-site finance director who typically would be advancing this issue to me. And that's why it happened. There's not an excuse. I'm simply trying to relate the reality of what occurred, and that is why there was a delay. and it's in front of you now,
And
and that's simply the reality.
and respectfully,
Ms.
this
Sutton.
occurred the end of December, before there was any inkling of some changes in the finance department.
We
There
did
was
not,
a
we did not
split
have
of
a
a purchase
contract.
order.
We didn't
I'd
have a
like-
bill. There was no contract, there was no bill. Mr. Shi just explained to you that this was an ongoing organic thing happening as to how expensive this would or would not be, because they did not even understand under the mud what the extent of this damage might be to generate that sort of conversation.
Was it
So
above
that's
$25,000?
what occurred.
But
That's
to
what
me, the
occurred.
question is, why wasn't the original purchase order written for 53,000?
I don't
That
know.
was the-
I did
that
not,
was-
I did not,
that was that
I never
Or
saw
more
that or
correctly,
reviewed it.
That's
I don't
the
know
real
the answer.
question.
Why was
Why
it
was it
split?
not?
Why was it split to exactly $25,000? The invoice and that first purchase order, all of that happened in early February before we had any issue with the finance director. And the purchase order was clearly split.
The person who was responsible for that action and who could answer your question of why isn't here anymore.
Right.
So
which
no
is-
matter how many times you ask the question, you're not gonna get a better answer.
Well,
He's not here.
I think now that the issue's been raised and awareness has been brought to it, I would hope that in the future it won't be an issue. And there's no changing what has already happened. We can only deal with the reality of the situation now, which is that we need to approve this expenditure.
with all due respect, this was intentionally, a PO intentionally split. We've had numerous conversations and meetings over the course of time that I've been on council, that it's highly problematic to split a PO. It's highly problematic to break up a project into pieces.
So what would your remedy be at this particular moment?
Well, let's-
I'm concerned that this is not the first time this happened.
Well, let me ask this, Mayor, you agree that it's inappropriate to split POs, right? Or projects into little tiny pieces and
Yes.
you can't have $1 million.
Yeah, I don't have to check with a lawyer and ask you if I defend the Constitution. I understand.
Well, that's my point. So this was, if Joe did this, it's something he shouldn't have done. It's just wrong. That to split a PO to get it under your spending limit is just inappropriate.
It's a violation of our ordinance.
No, I'm not ready to draw that conclusion. They can start the project with, can't they start the project? I'm gonna ask the law director, because I wasn't part of it, so I don't know the answer, or I wasn't part of the decision-making. Let me finish, please. That the project was started within the mayor's $25,000 authority to get the project going. Is that an emergency?
But
It's an emergency issue going
action.
on.
But
The
so
mayor shall notify council
But it
of
was not
such
to exceed
expenditure at the next meeting of
53,000.
council.
that's for the written,
So you were-
that's for the written approval.
You were committing to up to 53,000.
You're reading from the written.
I
approval.
committed nothing.
Well,
I didn't do anything.
I know, but once they started work,
There's
you
no
were
question
bound
you
to
should
pay
have
up to
brought it
53,000.
Thank you.
But
And so
who
the
But he's not
authorized the
here,
project to
so we
start?
can't discipline him.
Yeah, you can't,
Who authorized the project to start?
It's an
Everyone who
emergency
lived in
project.
that area who wanted to drive on that
So-
street.
It's not a
Somebody
land
has to
question,
authorize it.
it's
Somebody-
the course of the
all right,
project.
Somebody has to.
Let's pause for a second. Is this simply intended to be a beat up on either the mayor or the former, let me finish, or the former finance director who's not here to explain what occurred or why it occurred? Because I think that's inappropriate. And if we, right now, as Ms. Godick pointed out, what occurred then was in an emergency situation. We were trying, the people making the decision, which would have been the finance director, I assume, authorizing it to go forward, to say that the mayor had $25,000 of unfettered ability to start the project going. I don't know that there was going to be, as some certainty, 53,000, 39,000. It was an emergency with water flooding out the northwestern segment of Pepper Pike, and somebody has to get to work, ladies and gentlemen. You just can't sit here and say, well, we're gonna start noticing everything. Let me finish,
No,
please.
because you.
Yes, you will let me finish, please, you're out of order. Excuse me, you let me finish, please. That is the purpose of that is what an emergency is. An emergency is definition, an emergency. Things had to start happening. Pipes had to get shut off, roadways had to get preserved. That's what was undertaken. If missteps were made along the way, we will look into that and see that, as Ms. Godek says, we will not have that be happening again. We typically do not encounter emergency situations. It is unfair for anyone to say, well, gee, this happened here. I don't know how many other times that may have occurred. Well, we haven't had emergencies before, at least that I'm aware like that, in the 14 years that I've been the mayor of this city. So I don't think it's fair to say, oh, but they just go around splitting invoices all the time. That is without any basis whatsoever to say. And it is not appropriate to even suggest such a thing happen.
The nature of the project is not the point. The merit of the project is not the point. Everybody supports the nature of the project and the merit of the project. The point is that this was not a misstep. This was not a mistake. This was an intentional splitting of a PO because he was clear that it was over the limit. Don knew it was gonna be over the limit. It's not Don's fault, and we shouldn't be pointing the finger at Don. Don knew it was gonna be over the limit. The estimate, the quote was for $53,000. He just said that it would probably be between $30,000 or $40,000, he thought, in that range. Again, over the $25,000 limit. The timeline and the actions demonstrate there was an intentional splitting of the PO. That's very problematic. The project, let's not make it about the project. That has nothing to do with it. That's a distraction. The accounting, the representation of the project and the circumventing of council by splitting the PO and the related actions, it was more than one action, are the problem.
Okay. I would
by
ask
the
for
way-
a motion to approve
I
the
wasn't
ratification of this. You've now seen it. I'm asking for a motion to approve.
I wasn't even finished.
I'm
And then
sorry,
the
I thought you
check was issued for the full amount. The check was issued for the full amount. All demonstrating that there was a clear intent to split the PO, and we've had conversations about how inappropriate it is to split a PO. In theory, any project then could be started under the $25,000 limit without ever coming to council, and it could be parceled off into little segments, and any project could get done. The whole point of the $25,000 limit is to have review by council. That's basically one of our main roles. And I believe the $25,000 is an increased limit from what it was at one point.
Steve, what is the lawsuit?
So just, my point is just process-wise, just,
I
I wanna make
understand,
sure.
I understand this.
It's making sure that we have good processes and we follow them, and so that's why I asked you that question about if a potential contract is $50,000 estimated, to me, you can't engage in that contract without, you don't have the authority to do that. And you can't say, get started and we'll fix it later.
No one is trying to do that.
Okay, well, that's my main point here, then Joe shouldn't have split that anyway. He should have just said, it's $39,000, we need an emergency meeting or whatever to get that over the front. So as long as we're good with it, you don't split invoices, that's,
No, we don't split invoices.
that's the main process.
If,
But I still don't understand who said in Rhode you can go ahead at 50, with a
I'll have
$50,000 project.
knowing it wasn't me involved in the project, I can't give you that answer. I will look for that answer and I will get back to you, Mr. Gentile.
And so just go back to the appropriation point, I got these two exhibits from Sheila.
Yes,
So looking at the one that we did a year in 24, which is kind of the true-up one, if you will. So providing for additional appropriation shall be made in transfers items already appropriated. So when I look at this and look at the line items, so this is by, it looks like it's by fund, right?
No, it's by department within fund.
Well,
oh, this may be is this not the appropriation ordinance? This may be.
well, this is the true-up from last year, it's just kind of. So
There's
this,
some ordinance that was last year.
I'm sorry.
so, yeah, look at this one. So it looks like, so this is the true up at the end of 24.
Yeah.
To reappropriate as needed.
Yes,
And as I look down this, my question is, are all of these, that I can't match them, I think all of these are funds.
There's something missing from this because Joe always provided an explanation for each and every item that was in the additional request column. And that's not on here.
There is another comment page that's not part of this. It's just, there's another comment page apparently not part of.
It's not a part of the ordinance.
Not part of
It's
the
an explanation to council of how those numbers were arrived at in the fund account.
But that
It's not a part of the ordinance.
says that it's done on a line item basis. That's the basis on which we approve it. On a line item basis.
But is that, and I can't remember that, my question is, did that say, well, we increased the solid waste fund because of that?
Yes.
Okay, but if it's just increasing the fund as a whole,
It was,
then,
every line item was explained. There were notes that, in fact, I thank Joe for providing those notes because they were helpful.
but if this is the appropriation ordinance, then is it not a by fund appropriation?
No,
Not by,
this is by department within fund. These are all departments. There's no label, there's a label at the bottom of the general fund. But these appropriations are done by departments within the fund. For all of the funds.
so the one we're talking about tonight, though, Tony, is the capital improvement.
Right.
And that's done by fund.
Yes, that is,
So-
that's correct. That is done.
So for the issue tonight then, because it's a capital item, it's fair to say, I think it's fair, but correct me if I'm wrong, that we did have appropriated funds, not by line item, but by fund.
Well, we're in 2025.
Well, the same thing is on the 2025.
Yes, I would have to say that it was appropriate under the view that,
Fund level rather than line item level. So for that, we're over that hurdle.
Good.
For the appropriation. And then the next hurdle, is just my concern over the invoice splitting, which you told us that was not practiced, shouldn't be practiced, and is wrong. And then the last item is notice to council, which you explained your position on that, so.
But respectfully, if you weren't aware of this PO splitting, how would you know what other POs?
I mean, Joe had done this previously and it just never came up.
Yeah. I mean, it's really problematic. It's
Well, we are
clearly-
audited
Wait, I'm
every
finishing.
year.
I'm still
We are
talking.
audited every year by
You've
the
interrupted
state.
her
auditor.
multiple times this
I
evening.
apologize. I did interrupt you. I apologize.
It was clearly an intentional PO split. It's for exactly $25,000. Then the remainder comes exactly a month later for the remainder. It's an intentional split. And then the check is issued in the full amount. The original quote was for far in excess. It was in excess of $50,000, almost 54. And there was never a thought that it would be below $25,000. It was always going to be in excess of $30,000 or $40,000. Therefore, it was intentional. It was intentionally split. And this is one of the most highly problematic things that can happen as far as the $25,000 spending of 30. There are pretty much there are very few things that are more problematic. I mean, this is a control issue. I mean, it has to do with internal controls and it has to do with council's authority. One of our core roles. And I just don't know how we can just act like this is a one-off when we don't know that. Or that it's not a big deal, when it is a big deal. I understand some people might not understand that, but it is.
And it was him, the reason this is coming to light was because I asked a question about it. Like, it wasn't that it was presented to us in any other way. We have a motion to ratify because of a question at the finance committee meeting. So,
Yeah, I mean, I understand that Joe's gone and Joe supposedly did this, but Steve, what does the law say about these kinds of things, like,
If there were an audit of this and it discovered that there was an expenditure that was not in accordance with the city's ordinances, there would be a statement that you can't do that. That's what the audit would say, don't do that. And if there's a motion to authorize the expenditure of up to the amount that makes it legal, so you can pay lawfully, it's the end of the matter as far as the audit says. It'd be an audit comment that then you haven't followed your ordinances. And then, but you did lawfully pay the contractor the money that you owed him. So my legal recommendation is, you've said what you had to say to the administration. My recommendation is approve a motion to authorize the payment which has been made so that it's a lawful payment. There's no question the work was done, right, Don? And it was quality work on an emergency basis, right?
Yeah, and if I'm not trying to add more variables to this, but initially, time of year, December 30th, literally New Year's Eve and all that stuff. The contractor was out there doing some work, saw cutting. I think they wanted to know that they would be paid for whatever work they did. They hadn't spent $25,000 yet, but they showed up and started trying to deal with the situation.
No one's questioning paying them.
No, that's the motion that's on the table. So there's no question that they should not have split the invoices. You're exactly right. You caught that. That was wrong.
Big
And
wrong,
it-
Steve.
it-
Big wrong.
Agreed. And if you have any other instances that you can point to and said it's ever happened before, please let us know. But my understanding from what all this conversation is, this has not happened before. And the person who did it isn't here anymore.
Well, we're not
Your
implying that
tone- your
this
tone
is
of voice was
anything to do with
inappropriate.
the reason why he's not here.
No, I'm trying to get us back on the agenda item, which is to pay, to authorize the payment.
That's fine. The tone of voice is what I was in.
And also, I don't want to imply that
Stop
the reason
it.
he's here has anything to do.
Excuse me, there's too many comments in the peanut gallery here while you're discussing. It's very rude and inappropriate, everybody. I would like,
And I would like,
please
I
make
would
a
like-
statement. to
I have not
Everybody
heard
should
that
zip it.
myself, Ms. Gascoigne. I've heard you, but I'd ask all
Okay, of
people in the
course.
audience to
Thank
please
you.
not have discussions that distract
I have.
the council.
So I just proactively on this, because this was an unusual circumstance, and it's January 1st, and assembling a meeting of council would be problematic. Well, I mean, before they started working. I mean, they started.
Before they started working.
Yeah, but hear me out, just, I don't know if it's appropriate to have an amendment to our contract ordinance that narrowly defines the word emergency and allows you to do this in appropriate circumstances, so that when you have to act, you can act with appropriate speed and not run afoul of the ordinance and not have any of this happen. So I don't know if other communities have something like that, but it would be worth looking into, because
I agree with you, and that may be a productive thing.
And the one thing that we should pay attention to is at the initiation of the activity and the contractor's performance, the time and materials isn't known. So you can't know, you're right, as soon as the total amount is known.
but he had an estimate not to exceed, so he had that. He had a promise not to exceed 55,000.
It was, whatever the number was, about 50, but that was given to me after they had already started doing this work. They were already done.
But in normal course, you can get a not to exceed from an owner, right? And they'll goose it up so they're protected, so you have a number.
Right.
That they promise this won't take more than 55.
They don't think that's their outside number.
That's their outside number. So if we have that, Steve, in most instances, you can get a not to exceed number. That, we can say, this is within the authorization, we're all good.
What we have, the process that we have in our code, that because we're a charter community, we can do this. Most municipal councils, most school boards and township trustees and so forth can't do written approval. We have a provision on our code that we can circulate a written document to council. And if you get to 4 on the writing, you can say, we've got to go ahead. So going forward with the new treasurer, we could implement that process.
That was available for them.
It's in the code now. And then the next thing you do, what Ms. Zatrok was reading from is that must be reported at the next council meeting. So you have transparency on the council written approval of whatever the action is. And so now that everybody's aware of this issue, we probably won't have such an emergency for another 20 years, but we can be ready for it and circulate. We just had this thing, we had a not to exceed come out, please let us know. You can go, I mean, if we did it early enough, you could go out and watch the contract before. But the option is there for council to be both informed and weigh in on the emergency expenditure. At a minimum, it could have been brought to the next meeting and approved by council at the next meeting once the final number was known. And I think there was a report of the emergency break. I think we knew about that.
Yes, there was a report.
But that's avoiding the key problem. I mean, those are, nobody, I'm speaking for this, nobody is disputing that this was an emergency or it was important, and nobody is disputing that we should have done this work in a timely fashion. But we're talking about all these other things, I think intentionally to avoid talking about the fact that the PO was split, to hide that it was put through, and the only reason we know about it is because Ms. Zatrock found it. The PO was intentionally split to circumvent the process. That is, to me, the real truly troubling thing. Nobody is, and it's frustrating and disappointing that somebody would imply that we're talking about whether this project should have happened, or that we don't understand or appreciate the fact that it's an emergency. We appreciate that. We understand that. And we did meet 3 times in January, so there could have been many occasions to bring it to our attention. There was a quote for almost $54,000. This was never going to be under $25,000. And we knew that every step of the way, and the PO was split because it was too much of a burden to bring it to council. And my concern is that, I shouldn't say a burden, it was seen as not important or not necessary to bring it to council. So there was $25,000, and exactly 1 month later, there was the remainder. It was intentionally done, and nothing was heard from it in January or February or March until Ms. Zatrock brought it up. Now we hear about it because it's clearly a big deal that the PO was split. And we've had that conversation multiple times, that you can't parcel off a project into little pieces so that so that the $25,000 spending authority is really meaningless. If everything can be parceled off, then there is no limit on the spending authority. And I really think we need to know whether this has happened before. There's no reason to believe, it's naive for me to believe that just because we found this one situation here, that this is the only time that happened. We have a fiduciary duty to make sure that it's not happening frequently or every so often.
The invoice date was 1/31/25.
Right, and it was brought up, I think Ms. Zatrock's comment occurred at the Finance Committee meeting
in March.
at the end of February.
No, it was March 25th.
It was March?
It was March.
Okay. Well,
Listen,
I'm not here to debate or even argue with,
No,
but
I'm
I don't
just
think the
arguing.
process did not work the way it's supposed to work. There's no issue about that. The issue here tonight, and all these things that either Ms. Waltman or Mr. Gentile or Ms. Zatrock, anyone, these other things you bring up, I'm not trying to disabuse, your feelings about it or what you believe in the importance of it. Right now, on this agenda tonight, we have the need to entertain or not a motion to ratify the labor and expenses for those emergency repairs. Can I hear a motion for that?
I'll make that motion. And then I have one other discussion point after we.
Okay, discussion.
So Steve, as you read that ordinance, it's by contract, right? So it's the 25,000 is for performance of a contract in its entirety. So this would have been one contract, if you will, right? Okay, I just want to make sure you, all right.
Go ahead, sorry.
Can we have a roll call, please?
No,
There's more discussion that's not, okay, more discussion.
I want to understand, when you made mention of the written contract, are you looking at F or G in the code? Because I have them printed right here. I'm trying to understand, because I looked at F. I just want to.
It has to do with the mayor's discretionary spending authority.
Okay, so that can be written? That has to be written? It has to, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, we can review it later. I just want to make sure I was looking at the.
I'm sorry,
part of the
I
code.
just want to say I find this deeply troubling. It's a red flag in our budget. I think we need a real, an internal control auditor of some sort. These are internal controls. This is highly problematic. It might not seem problematic because we're talking about the the topic of the project. The project is not problematic. The accounting, the splitting of the PO is problematic. Don's work was not problematic. The splitting of the PO is problematic and how it's being brought to us now. And I think we need to know if this kind of practice or other practices similar to this are happening. And we're trying to breeze over it because it's embarrassing.
There's a motion and a second. Roll call, please.
Mr. Knoll?
Yes.
Ms. Zatra?
No.
Ms. Weltman?
No.
Ms. Godin?
Yes.
Mr. Levin?
Yes.
Mr. Gentili?
No.
Dr. Vaughn?
Yes.
Thank you. Next, we're going to go on to the discussion of future walkability projects. This year, we have accomplished a lot in walkability since 1 year ago. We have the Lander Road project completed. We have the, well, not per se part of the walkability project, we do have the multi-purpose trail and the Gates Mill Linear Park nearing completion. We have the Shaker Boulevard project at least approved for Mr. Sheehy to have designed it, as well as South Woodland, and that is underway. I think it's time to turn our attention to future projects, and that is why I respectfully place this on the agenda this evening to begin that conversation and discussion. I have received a number of inquiries over the last year since this whole walkability project began to be initiated, that we were, what's next? Where are we looking to do this again? And the streets have been wide and varied. Pine Tree, Brainerd, Fairmount, Cedar.
What was in the original plan? Shaker, Southwood, Lander, wasn't there? That was it?
And the Gatesville Trail. And the
On the
Gatesville
Gatesville
Trail.
Trail, okay.
And the police, I've discussed this perspective idea with the police chief. He feels that Brainerd would be an important addition to walkability. I think as we look at the future additions to these walkways, we ought to be looking to things that provide both safety and provide connectivity to existing walkways that we've already installed, because that is what people want to see. We of course have our $500,000 grant for the upcoming extension of the Gates Mills pathway. The additional just shy of a mile down Gates Mills Boulevard through the median, and the addition of the park through that median up to Cedar Road. I think we should be looking at the extension of the park trailway as part of, but also separate, I think, from the streets walkways. The street walkways are what ought to be connecting in many ways to that central park walkway. I think Brainerd makes a lot of sense. I think Fairmount makes a lot of sense because there's a lot of connector streets that will, fill into those that then would have connectivity to the existing trail and other sidewalks. So that my intent is to kick off this conversation tonight, try to move it forward so that we have some direction, some encouragement we can give to the community that this is going to take place and that it's going to take place in a reasonable time. So
What's the highest density street in terms of attracting walkers and side streets? We kind of went that way before. And we had this map that showed number of homes and feeder streets to this sidewalk, and I think we prioritized those two streets as being the biggest one. And I'm looking up at the map there, and certainly Brainerd and Fairmount are probably the two.
Bring the map in.
I mean, I'd love to hear Don weigh in, even before we start talking, from your perspective,
Well,
what
I have
makes
a-
most
but I have-
sense.
But I have a question for.
sure, go ahead.
Have my hand up. We had received a an email from someone on the building about the safety and the walkability there. And I have always felt that recreational trails were appropriate, more appropriate really for neighborhoods than they are for the main streets. That may be my own view only, but I think that would be a good use of them. That is a connector street or a cut-through street that has a lot of homes on it. It also has a lot of side streets. And I would think that would be a good candidate for, now, I say that only because I drive. There are probably
No,
other.
you're one of the cut-through guys.
I am. And there are other cut-throughs that I don't use, but I think that one is an obvious choice. But before we get to that, I think we really need to address, this is all money, right? The accessibility in City Hall. We can't wait until we decide what we're doing in City Hall, I don't think. We need to have two things going down the track.
I think we can have two. I don't disagree with you. I think we can have two things going down the track. One of the great fortunes of the careful collection of resources over the last many years is that we can afford to have more than one thing down the track at a time. So I don't disagree with you.
I don't think we can wait until we decide if or what we're going to do with this building.
Okay.
I agree with you. I think it's a matter of dignity. I don't think people should have to, first of all, not have access to a restroom on our first floor of a building. Should have to be in an elevator in the condition that this elevator is in, should not be able to use it themselves, and also shouldn't have to be announced by basically a blaring horn when they arrive. I think that's a failure of dignity for people in our community who should be able to access this building the same way as everyone else accesses it. And we've been talking about this since I came on council. I know it's something that many of us have brought up. I know I've brought it up. I mean, and it just doesn't seem to happen because it gets subsumed in a bigger project, and it's a priority. I mean, if anything is a priority, that is a priority.
All right, well, let's put that on the agenda. We can return to that subject at our next council meeting. Happy to put it on the agenda for that.
The point of this is just to prioritize where we'll look, right? I mean, in terms of the next sidewalk, which street we're.
Yeah, the discussion and, to get a sense of the commitment that we are going to be kind of moving ahead with these things.
And I agree with Jim about, I think that map that Don gave us before shows, where we get the most bang for our buck. That's the way, that's the way.
Well, let's bring that back for next meeting and go through that with real data.
Dr. Wong?
Now that we're talking about more walkability, would it be reasonable to go back to our residents and maybe do a survey and see, we haven't done one since the original one in a few years, but, I mean, we don't have to, but what streets? they
Survey
might think-
regarding what?
Which streets they want, what they
I think
think.
people are
I
gonna
don't know.
choose.
Everyone's gonna vote for their own street.
We're not,
I mean,
we're not, yeah.
Somebody
I
else's
remember that.
The most popular street wins. right?
Maybe like a email thing or.
My only kind of question about it was, and I'm trying to find it, was specifically what the ballot language was. Did we spell out with specifics which street it was? And then if so, I want to make sure that we're really following the track on what we asked the community, what the answer was, and then.
It
what-
did, and that's the streets we've done or have authorized to do.
Exactly, and so
but
we
I-
went for specific permission and
Well,
with that.
yeah, but
I just
Right.
want to ask the question.
I don't see that
I
as
don't need booze.
Yeah,
I'm just asking.
yeah, we did do that, but I don't see that as limiting. I think that is.
No, I mean, and it was advisory at that, but
Right,
still,
right.
it was specific. It wasn't just, do we want walkways in Pepper
Yeah,
Lake?
just-
It was, do we want walkways on A, B, and C?
And I
Just to
think-
give people a sense of what the initial scope of the project would be. I don't think it was an intent to limit the overall project to those streets. I don't think that was the intent.
That was the language, but
Yeah, and it said main streets or some, or
I
key
think it
streets.
said-
I think
or-
it goes under.
Yeah.
It's specifically called out. the street.
another thing I think we
Okay.
need to, we haven't really ever done the follow-up. I think the SATROC maybe brought it up, maybe at a finance committee meeting. And that has to do with the costs of of the actual cost of these projects, the full cost, because we've never really talked about it. We kind of budgeted in and then kind of falls to the wayside. I'd like to also know the true full cost, including design, legal fees, any of each project we've done. So as we plan, we can know where we're going to be.
Are those items materially above the construction amount?
No, I'm just
I think
saying.
they are. I don't think the design was, or any of that was
So,
included
yeah,
in the construction cost, or was it not?
I think
Isn't that in the total budget, the design is really not?
The way that we've provided estimates for construction costs.
Okay.
But,
Pure
just pure construction. But for like Lander Road, I was just asked about this just recently. We budgeted the original amount for Lander Road, took it all the way to Cedar. Budget was $1,460,000. We didn't do that entire amount, but we did what we did. If you prorated it, it'd probably be about $1.3 million.
Okay.
Construction costs were about $980,000.
So it was under.
It was well under,
And what-
and I don't know, I don't have, my bills are to the city, I haven't gone through and adding them
But
up, but
if you had to estimate design cost for that ballpark, just
it's probably,
between X and Y, just, yeah,
I hate to do this, but
okay,
between $60,000 and $100,000.
okay. So it's 10%, 5 to 10% of construction.
And Don, does that include, so I don't know, I know, originally I thought MPSK was doing it, I don't know if you're doing it, someone else is doing it, but the implementation of the project, tangential projects that might happen, so like tree placements that aren't part of maybe a design, sewer projects. I'm just trying to understand how much we're spending on each project,
Yeah, well,
because
like,
I'm concerned that there's.
Lander Road is a standalone. That project, MPSC had no part in that project.
Yeah, I know,
So
no,
there's no
I
dollar
know,
amount.
when I said that, I was referring to.
Right, but like for Lander Road, for instance, the inspection is actually included in the contractor's estimate. And we do that, we actually take it out of the contractor's estimate. So when I tell you the construction cost, it also includes inspection. Part of the reason we do that is it motivates the contractor to be timely. If they take 100 days to do something as opposed to 50, they're spending their own money on inspection.
I agree with Ms. Goodick, maybe Don at the next meeting can give us a map and kind of give us suggestions.
Yeah, from what I heard, there's a piece of Brainerd that would potentially be, I think, high density,
Big bang for the buck.
big bang for the buck. The section from Fairmount, from Lander going east would be a possible location. Because you pick up those subdivisions on the north side.
Which part of Brainerd was that?
Brainerd from Shaker to Fairmount.
Lander, sorry. Okay, sorry.
Brainerd Road heading north,
From here.
basically from here to, certainly to Fairmount by the bridge. And that's, you have a destination there with the school facilities and the synagogue. And then I would look at Pine Tree potentially. There's a number of other spots, just a matter of how many you want me to check out.
Bolingbrook next to,
And Bolingbrook does have, there's some geometric
next to
challenges.
two of our already, or soon to be existing sidewalks. Or, well,
And I know it's not the same
Recreational
project, but
trails.
I know we got off track, but I was really referring more to the Gates Mills project because of how it came together. There were all these buckets of money, right? Not inappropriately.
Right.
But we don't really know how much we completely spent. At least I don't think
Yeah.
council's ever gotten that full number, including everything, including putting it in, including anything that came up along the way, including legal fees, including anything, just so we know, because we're going to do a very similar project again, and now we have a pretty good number. Of course, there can be differences, but I think it's really important to know, this is how much, it's nothing to be embarrassed about. It's a good project, but I think we should know how much it costs.
Well, you're certainly not embarrassed about it, and the amount of the costs
No, I'm
is
not
the project.
embarrassed of the project.
The project isn't closed yet, but we can get you the numbers up to date. We do have those numbers of what has been spent
What
up
I'm
to date.
saying that not to be embarrassed about is, however much we spent is what we spent. I like the project, as you know, I'm a frequent walker. But but I'd like to know exactly how much we spent, including everything, because that's reality. And we're very capable of looking at the costs and saying, okay, that's how much it costs, now the next section will probably be similar. At least we can use that as a benchmark.
Not a problem.
Mr. Mayor, are you saying the lander isn't completed yet?
No, Gates Mills Travel.
Oh, Gates. Right, that I agree, but lander,
Lander, we actually haven't totally closed out the contract.
really.
There's a couple slabs that cracked over the winter, contractors can come back and
Just
fix
put
it.
a buck 98 for those, or 53.
We're not paying him any
I
extra,
can do it
but
as an emergency.
Yeah. there's about 15 grand in it. We haven't closed it out.
Well, so we know pretty much.
Pretty darn close. We're well under $1 million. We're about 350,000 below the construction estimate.
I don't remember what construction is.
That was, it was about, it included more than we actually paid. It was about
1.3 on a per
about
rate.
1.3.
Don, could you also look at, we've got some emails from residents that live in more of the high density places, like Edgewood Trace and Lux. I don't know if it's reasonable to extend anything out that way, in your kind of overview, maybe
Right.
next time.
You have Cedar, obviously, potentially for sidewalk. Cedar has some challenges from a design standpoint. It would be in some ways a good road to sidewalk, but it's also more costly because there are some culverts and things you gotta get across and some streams across, so.
There's
then
not
you
a
go-
lot of room there either.
There's not a tremendous amount of room, it's kind of built out, so if you end up with something that might be maybe more urban looking than you would like.
They're very close to the road.
You might have a 6 or 7 foot sidewalk running basically right behind you.
And there's nothing on the other side.
Mayfield Heights side, they have some, it's not contiguous.
It doesn't connect.
It doesn't connect.
I live on Cedar. Can we look at sewers there too while we do it? Please.
So I think the list you came up with is good to come back the next meeting and
Could at least try to give you some
Some
framework
sense
for,
of-
here's this section, here's how many residents it can service, here's the approximate cost.
And I would also love to know what's a reasonable pace to move at. I know, we look like split the existing project home kind of in half, or the first project kind of in half. It's, there's a lot of demand, like people are excited.
Right.
So like if it's possible to do more than what we've been doing so
Yeah,
far.
we can do a lot, sometimes you don't wanna get
You
too
know,
far
I get
ahead of your
it.
skis with
Yeah.
other projects
Yeah.
that might be out there and stuff like that. I think South Woodland was a good example where we got a grant, which maybe postponed us doing something, but it was the right thing to do. So we do try to time a little with other projects that are going on.
Yeah.
So that a little bit of research is required, we contact Dominion, Cleveland Water, all that kind of stuff to see if they ever take plans.
And I appreciate that in the scheme, because I know we talked about that. I know that there are residents disappointed on South Woodland that their portion's being delayed because of that sewer project. So I think that what ones would be potentially shovel ready, that we don't have those infrastructure upgrades that we're aware that need to be done. Because again, like we get some feedback that we're holding up something when the reality is like we're improving the environment, we're improving the homes, like all of the things are so good, the delays can be temporary. So be mindful of that in the recommendations, please.
And I think, even a clarification again, because I don't know if people are aware what happened with South Woodland. Some people are, of course, but I don't know, I received a question about it. So I don't know if that's it's probably more, a communication effort on our part to explain to people why there's delay on part of that project.
Last comment on Bolingbrook was that street needs sewers, so I think that we need to coordinate that if we're gonna do it.
That's one of the things that, I know we talked a little bit about it even in our infrastructure committee, like that's great potential for future expansion for sanitary sewer. And you certainly wouldn't want to start a sidewalk program, but maybe when the sewer's done is the ideal time.
Well, and as an interim step, since we're talking about a street like Bolingbrook and we did get, an email about it, maybe there are steps we can take, obviously, in the interim. I'm sure there are. I'm sure the police are probably already on it. But it's everywhere, in these cut-through areas, but to slow people down. Because it doesn't matter if we're doing something in a year or two, if somebody is harmed in the
Don, can you just real quick, timing for Shaker and Woodland for the projects for this year?
Plans for South Woodland are essentially done. I'll have a set file with the city by next week. Shaker's still working on, but that should be maybe another week or two.
Okay.
So we potentially like to get authorization to bid South Woodland at next council meeting. And then the Shaker portion, maybe the council meeting after that.
And from a design standpoint, similar to, I mean, they're different roads and have
Yeah.
different conditions, but
There's more space than we had on Lander. We've done a little bit less meandering than we did on Lander. But we're a little bit, generally, we're a little bit further away from the pavement because we have so much area to work with. Plus, we're trying to stay totally on one side of the road.
And that's on South Woodland.
On Southwood, yes.
And the plan is to continue to keep the color as a natural.
Yeah, that worked out fine. And even at this point, I don't know that if we would have sprayed it white, it might still be a little white, but in a couple of years, it'll probably all be the same. But I think this worked out fine.
yeah, it worked. That was a good solution.
Don, could you in your evaluation also include safety enhancement, which I think is important? And that, for example, Brainerd, that would be a big safety enhancement. To me, it's not just the residents who are served in the log, but it's also the safety.
Yeah, I think when you try to develop a little bit of a pecking order, it's number of residents, but it's also what's the traffic volume on that section? That portion of Brainerd might have twice the number of cars as the portion of Fairmont.
Okay. Thank you for engaging in the conversation, council, and we'll move on. Committee, we had no committees. No. So, department heads, have you anything to report?
Online testing closed today for the 2 new hiring spots in the police department. 24 candidates last time I checked. 24.
Wonderful.
Yeah, by today's standards, it's pretty good.
Yeah, we have a few, there's several very interesting candidates among the ones who have applied, but we're at the beginning of the process. Chief, anything? Mr. Evans?
Who's sorry?
Okay.
The committee, just for 1 second. Jackie and I are going to try and develop a questionnaire for membership on the road infrastructure because we lost one of our members. So we have to have an application process where we can evaluate people who are interested.
Okay, very good.
Can I add to that communications committee, same issue?
Okay. Thank you, sir. No, just for you.
Fire.
You have to leave, Chief. I understand.
Listening to a call for a second.
Is it just a ball game or?
Yes.
I could have sworn I heard Hank.
Third corner.
Let's see, what's happened since we were last together? We had an election. And, the election's over. I look forward to working productively in a positive way with council as we move forward. And those are my comments on the election. Otherwise, before we meet again on May 27th is Memorial Day on May 26th. And as usual, we will have our commemorative Memorial Day celebration. Not celebration, commemoration, pardon me. It's not a celebration, it is in every way a commemoration. And that begins at 10 a.m. Here in front of City Hall, weather permitting. And we've been good with the weather every year except one in the many years we've undertaken this. And this year's speaker, we may have a second speaker coming up, but the first Established speaker is Father Joseph Brancatelli. Father Joe is a retired Army chaplain. He served in Iraq and many other places in the world. He spent 2 years at Arlington National Cemetery. So he has encountered the consequences of our great men and women who have served this nation and have lost their lives, and they deserve all of our honor and respect on this upcoming Memorial Day. We will be, of course, accompanied in our observances by the Orange High School Band, and there will be appropriate remarks, and I invite everyone to come. I have, without exception, found the event to be both appropriate and moving, and I invite everyone to please attend. The other thing that would be winding down in
I think Father, just sorry to interrupt, I think Father Joe is the pastor at St. Mary's in Chardon.
he's been down in St. Clairsville recently. He may have been just where you're saying. He told me he's just moving back up here or being transferred, however
Unfortunately,
the church does it.
I saw him at a funeral for a cousin about 3 weeks ago.
Okay. Is that where he is then? Okay.
I believe so.
Okay. He was going to someplace near Mentor. Maybe it's that Chardon Church.
It's Chardon, yeah.
Okay.
St. Mary's.
I knew it was up near Mentor something.
Girls disagree.
And
It's not church, no. It's not.
Father Joe's, he's a wonderful guy. If you haven't encountered him or met him. And so I'm sure his remarks are going to be wonderful. When the high school dedicated the Veterans Memorial Wall at the high school, Father Joe was one of the speakers of that. That's where I first encountered Father Joe. And I had to reserve him for this event 1 year ago. That is, I was talking when I had missed him for last year. He said, "You better do it now if you want me to come." You have to book it now. So he's a very well respected and regarded in making these types of remarks. The project that is nearing conclusion in Pepper Pike is our food bank Harvest for Hunger drive. Unfortunately, our numbers remain pretty fixed to where they were one month ago when we were together, which is $2,300 at least below, maybe $2,700 below our goal of $10,000, which is a modest goal. And I would urge everyone within the sound of my voice or listening to this tape to please consider some contribution. $1, $5, $100, it's all very welcome. And I will be getting another reminder, at least to the community out, so that they will understand that if they've been holding back, the time is now.
There's a link on the website for that.
There's a link on the website, always for that. It's on the front page of the website. It'll be we'll be sending out a Pepper Pike post regarding Memorial Day in the next few days, and there'll be a link fixed right there to make it easy for people. And those are my remarks for tonight. Council?
I'd like to raise an issue that isn't exclusively relative to Pepper Pike, or relevant to Pepper Pike, but our state government right now is working through budget negotiations, happens every other year. And obviously a big part of that is how much money our schools can get. So I think a large percentage of our city lives here now or moved here at some point to take advantage of our amazing public schools. So there's two pieces in current negotiations that are really crucial. And I'm drawing on information gathered from a letter the superintendent sent out to the whole school community. I actually asked either if he or the treasurer would be able to attend either tonight's meeting or the one later in the month. and unfortunately I had conflicts. So I'm gonna, do my best to do a quick summary. But if anyone wants to read this letter, like, please reach out to me. It's on the school district's website. This is, a really important issue that impacts not only kids who are in the schools right now, but, it affects all our property values. So even if you don't take advantage of the schools or like super engaged with them, it affects all of us one way or another. So there's really two pieces. The first is there's a proposal to cap the amount of money that a district can carry over year to year. That would really hamper a district's ability to weather ups and downs, address unexpected expenses, and
Do they get dinged if they carry over too much money?
they would be
in their
forced
appropriation for the next year?
to basically give back above a certain amount. And that would potentially cause the district to have to come to the ballot more often for levies. And, we are so lucky that we haven't, do you know, Melanie, how long? It's been like an
it's been
unbelievably
like
long
a
time.
decade and a half, I think. And just to piggyback on what
Yeah.
you said, that extra money helps support, Orange gets not a lot of money from the state, via the state already. And some of it is used for other purposes, including a variety of things, a variety of needs in the community. But that money helps to make the buildings function the way they do. It's not just day-to-day expenses. So it's real money that the school district would have to find elsewhere. And it's part of good stewardship and planning on behalf of the school district that the levies are less frequent and the buildings are maintained and the infrastructure is maintained. And this would upend, a school district like Orange. It would really create challenges, and it would really, basically, they'd have to revisit a lot of funding.
Yeah, the way I think of it is sort of like living paycheck to paycheck versus having some money in the bank to plan a little bit more meaningfully, mindfully for the
Plan for
future.
projects and to plan for emergencies. Yes.
Yeah, and so then the second part is, there's this thing called the Fair School Funding Plan. This was passed several years ago and has been implemented in 3 phases. The first phase was a few years ago, the second phase was in the last budget cycle. This should have been the third and final phase. The House has abandoned it altogether. This was a bipartisan agreement, some, big people came together, they figured out what do these schools need to function at a basic level. DeWine's budget has, continues to use that model, but with 2022 numbers, which, what's happened in the past couple of years, what's inflation done. So, really curbing what our schools are getting. And so the call is really to fully fund this bipartisan plan going forward. So those are the 2 big issues in the current negotiations. Right now, the Senate's trying to figure out what they're going to propose. So we are represented by Jerry Serino in the Senate, and he is a very powerful member of the Senate. And so it's worth calling him or reaching out to him if you have an opinion you want to share. Our House representative is Phil Robinson. He is very supportive of the Fair School Funding Plan. So, give him a call, tell him, keep doing what you're doing. And again, this, to my mind, should be nonpartisan, bipartisan, however you want to call it. We should be funding our schools. So, Orange is lucky, we have resources. This affects kids just across the state in a really dramatic way.
And I think it's important what you're saying. And Orange already, the taxpayers in this community already almost completely fund the schools. We get a very small amount from the state. And it's the community's decision to fund the schools, I believe, the way they do and have good results and have, have our schools funded. It's part of our property values, it's part of our belief system. We help every kid in our schools, no matter what their needs are. So, this would really challenge a school district like ours. We're already not getting much from the state, but this would basically have them tell us that our community can fund our schools the way we want them to do it. And I would encourage anybody to reach out to Lynn Campbell. He can speak to the various iterations of this plan that have happened over the years and why it's so important to not just our kids, but our community.
And just to put numbers on it, the fully funded Fair School Funding Plan for Orange, we would get $1.9 million from the state. The current house would give us 650,000. Obviously, that's a huge ding. The truly startling numbers come from cities who aren't as fortunate as we are. Cleveland should, by all means, for the fair funding model, get 155 million, and they would be allocated 1.5 million. I mean, just absolutely breathtaking. So this is, a really important issue. Thank you for your patience with my sort of, secondhand presentation of it. But again, if anyone needs more information, I'm happy to talk further.
Thanks for drawing awareness to
Yeah.
that, Jackie. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Excellent, Jack. Thank you. Anyone else?
As you know, we have a big problem with Phragmites in pepper pike. So the good news is that pepper pike is under consideration for a grant to help fight Phragmites. There's an organization called the Great Lakes Phragmites Collaborative, which gets funding from the Great Lakes Restoration Initiative, which receives federal support. This collaborative offers small grants that aim to support local projects to collect data on Phragmites management. The goal is to find effective treatments and which one is most cost efficient. Essentially how this works is you have to choose a method. There are several different methods we study. You have to choose a method that your community is willing to use. And then they will gather all of this material and at some point be able to say, this is the best for your area or this will be better for you. And also cost efficiency necessary. So last month we submitted our bid for grant and thanks to NADMET and the service department for helping that. We don't know if we're going to get it, but I think there's a reasonable chance. One of the reasons is that ours seeks to remove Phragmites and control them from one of our retention basins. And one of the problems with the retention basins is that the Phragmites builds up to get organic material. And after a while, you lose the volume of your retention basin. And that in turn affects all the waterways because that water has nowhere to go. So we hope to know a result pretty soon. I don't know exactly when it should be, but it should be pretty quick. And I want to know that I learned a lot about grant writing from that. So I really, that we're going to have to deal with the Phragmites. Jim and I have talked about it. We're going to have to, this grant is not for a huge amount of money, but I think something to think about is, when we're talking about appropriations, is we need to spend some money on Phragmites control, because it's going to get out of hand.
Well, it's extraordinarily challenging dealing with Phragmites. And you brought up the idea of this grant that you had discovered and were looking at in prior meetings. And I congratulate you on your commitment to this really critical environmental issue. And thank you for pursuing it. Anyone else? All right, then we will turn to audience comments. Is there anyone in the audience? First, welcome to the audience. Good to see you all here. And anyone who wants to give some comment?
Yeah, good evening. My name is Zach Burkhans, 420 Lawton Lane. Been watching this on the video for a while. Wanted to come in here and just basically say this is the toned down version of this. Although having served since 2011, it's apparent that Mr. LeMay and Mr. Gentile have lost their way and no longer have the support of the community. I believe last week's election showed that. Ms. Weltman has served the community for a long time, first with the school board and then on council. She was also one of the 3 council liaisons along with Councilman LeMay and Gentile to the Charter Commission, and I believe they inappropriately dominated and corrupted the commission process. All 3 should be ashamed of themselves and step down. They've wasted resources of the community in a bare-knuckle attempt to get more power. They've disrupted a smoothly functioning government. There must be consequences for these negative actions. They can now best serve the city by gracefully stepping aside and giving others the chance to serve. I respectfully ask that they now voluntarily resign from office. Thank you.
Anyone else?
Richard Ferguson, 29200 Isdale Road. To follow on
what that gentleman said, I would just like to get in the council meeting minutes that the charter revision was rejected by the community by a vote of almost 2-1.
Patricia Whitman, 32349 Pine Tree Road in Hunter Pike. And I believe that if a new charter is going to be discussed again, that no one on the council should be involved. That they would be biased and they should recuse themselves from any involvement in a new charter.
Jean Gascoigne, 30496 West Landerbush, hello. First of all, I just want to say that my take on all the discussion was that one of the councilwomen's requests, and afterwards you could answer and let me know, repeated requests for information, starting maybe with January and through March for information about checks and so forth being split. She did not, it appears she did not get a reply from any of the other council members or any of the other folks of Pepper Pike office, or not office. So to me, there's a lot of discussion that everything else and the codes and the line items and everything, but the thing that stood out to me as a citizen is that somebody on the council requested repeatedly for answer and didn't receive it. That being said, I just want to say that there were many things, a lot of things I did not understand, and maybe some of the other people here in the audience, but I would like to say that whether I was squirming in my seat or not, this is an example of civics, how our government is run. And I appreciate it. That's what I like about, this is it, folks, We're not, we're allowed to be here and listen. And this is how you represent us, whether it's for now or in month 2. But this is how it works. And I think that to me, civics is very important. And I don't have any feelings about it. These are my beliefs. Thanks.
Mr. Knapp, you had your hand. I called on you before, so go ahead.
Manny Knapp, 2632 Somerset Road. I'm just very surprised that the gentleman's comment in regards to asking Councilman Newell, Councilman May, and Councilman Tony Gentili, Waltman, etc. I'm here to resign. I'm here. As someone who attended 16 out of the 17 meetings that were held by the commission, these people did a very, very professional job. You may not agree with their opinion, and that's fine. And that's what the election is about. Okay? But the work that they did and the support that they did was outstanding, as well as the commission. And right now, all of the sidewalks that you're talking about and all the other things that you're talking about, if it wasn't for those people and Mayor Bain, back when the administration changed over 14 years ago, okay, we wouldn't have any money right now in regards to it. They changed this city. We were broke. And now you're ready to just toss them around, toss them out. We were broke. We laid off 25% of the police, 25% of the fire, 25% of the service. Everything was cut, okay? It's those individuals and their diligence to this city that has made us where we are today. Because people kept saying, well, everything is running great. So one of the key items is because our budget is balanced and we've been managing the budget. I know some people were upset with the conversation before in regards to how the budget was being done and some questions that were happening back here. It's because of that diligence that we have the monies that we have. So I think it's very inappropriate, for that statement. I want to just go on record for that. And if you go back far enough, if you go back to 2019, there was a vote of 83% that voted down changing this city to mixed use on Beach Brook property. Okay, and that was one program. Mayor Bain has done a lot of great programs for the city, great programs. But one project that he had was he felt that it was the best interest of the city to change that over to mixed use. Well, 83%, basically 37,000 people voted that down. Even after that election, Mayor Bain still felt that Beach Brook should be a mixed use development. So the item is, he had his opinion and his thoughts, on there. And no one was calling for his resignation, back then. And, this is, people have their opinions and they should be allowed to voice their opinions. And if they don't agree with yours, just to say that they're not doing their jobs is thank you very much for your time.
Hi, I'm Robin Rosenstein, 28649 Bolingbrook Road. I'm the young woman behind the email that you all received about speeding.
You're the Bolingbrook.
I'm the Bolingbrook lady, the old Bolingbrook lady. I've lived on Bolingbrook for 2 years. My husband and I are new to the area. I wanted to make sure that the mayor and the council understand this is not a plea for sidewalks. This is not what I intended by the email. It's a question of safety. I looked through every single quadrant. I looked at the map of Pepper Pike in its entirety. Bolingbrook is the only residential cut-through street in the entire city. By residential street, I mean that the speed limit is 25. It's 25 miles an hour, and it leads from Shaker to Woodland and to Lander. And I think ever since the sewers went in and the sewers were redone on Shaker, it's become even more of a problem where some people, some vehicles have decided that Bolingbrook is a very convenient cut through and has less traffic on it where you could go faster. I'm sorry to say that it upsets me that I'm uncomfortable walking on my own street. I'm uncomfortable with the traffic. I'm uncomfortable with what may happen. I have a stroller, I have grandchildren. I'm not just looking out for myself, but to everyone else on the street that also feels that the level of speeding and distraction really compromise the safety. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
Eric Schmidt, 29449 Bolingbrook. I just want to add that I've lived on Bolingbrook for 22 years. It has not been safe for all 22 years that I've been there. It is a cut-through street. It has always been a cut-through street. And I too was afraid to take strollers out for a walk when my kids were young. Thank you.
Thank you.
Tamara Rennick, 31350 South Woodland. In the interest of full disclosure, I was one of the 9 members of the commission that recommended the charter changers. I just want to tell the community that I stand by what we did. We may not have been perfect, but we had good intentions, honorable intentions for our community. And the people that worked with us were intelligent. I was proud to serve with them. And the information that we were given and the questions that we asked to the council members were fully vetted, and we made an independent decision. We were not hanging on a rope, being strung along toward a decision. I know there's a lot of discourse. The vote has been settled. That's fine. I accept that. But there's a lot more behind those doors. And to call for the resignation, Zach, you're my friend, to call for the resignation of council members on this, I think is way over the top and disrespectful to the work that was done. Both council members who are your neighbors and who care about this city, and to the commission, and to the council, and to the commission members that have worked on this. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Yes, sir.
William Thompson, 30500 Providence, one of my favorite subjects tonight, sidewalks. I pulled up the survey that you paid $11,000 for about 2 years ago. Just encourage you to take a second look at it. If you hadn't looked at it in a while, I hadn't. There's a lot of really good data in there from 1,413 responses. I can quote that. I'm looking at the precedents because somebody asked like favoritism from the neighbors of streets. I've said that poorly. Certainly Lander, Shaker, South Woodland, boom, right there at the top. Really close seconds, the streets you already discussed. Fairmount Brainerd was interestingly split into two, a north of Shaker and south of Shaker. North of Shaker was slightly higher. I don't want to cite the whole results for you, but food for thought if you're looking for something to do tomorrow. Grab that thing you paid a lot of money for, because there's a lot of good information in there. So in my mind, no need to do a fourth survey. You just did one 2 years ago that has the information you're looking for. So that's it. Thank you.
Elton Reamer, 28099 South Woodland Road. I am dismayed with the kind of commentary between council members. I think it's disruptive at this point. I think if you have disagreements, they could be handled in a more civilized manner. I think there's an intention to discredit the mayor. And without the mayor, this city wouldn't be where it is now. Having lived in this city for 49 years, I'm amazed to see the improvements. And council with the mayor has brought this about. I believe that the commission did a great job, except it was rushed. I think there's always room for change, but I think to do it in a 6-month period doesn't make any sense. I think it would have helped if that charter issue would have been on the November ballot. Probably cost us a lot of money to put it on the May ballot unnecessarily. And I think there should be discussion about some changes. Anything that's been around for as many years as our charter has been could use some modifications. But I'm pleased the way the election went. And I think the council is always doing a good job, but the mayor should be applauded for what he's done.
Anyone else? All right, not seeing it. Thank you all for your comments. Not seeing any further. We have been asked by Councilman Zatrock and Mr. Lemay to adjourn to an executive session to discuss the appointment and compensation of city employees. And I would entertain a motion for that.
So moved.
No more conversation.
Any discussion? Not hearing any, roll call, please.
Mr. Knoll?
Yeah.
Ms. Zatrop?
Yes.
Ms. Welchman?
Yes.
Ms. Bowden?
Yes.
Mr. Lemay?
Yes.
Mr. Kincaid? Dr. Williams?
You want to give yours?
Stop.